Today's chat is brought to you by, well, all of your support. Through the patronage you provide the Focus Fire chat team through Podbean's crowdfunding, we are able to provide you with the weekly podcast as well as the website and other aspects of Focus Fire chat. If you have any interest in becoming a patron of the FFC, please be sure to visit our website and click on the support link. Even a single dollar helps, and for those of you who are already patrons, thank you again for your generosity. You may have heard the whispers of guardians gathering in the shadows, exploring the mysteries of this world and the worlds which surround us. We are all in search of truth. Sometimes we need to focus that search, focus that fire. And so we come together. Join us. Join the discussion. Welcome to Focused Fire Chat. Welcome back for episode 35 of Extra Lore, recorded live on February 1st. Wow, it's already February 1st. I blanked about that. Over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. As always, want to give a big shout out to our live chat here with us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us once again. Our topic for tonight's episode is going to be a look again at Halo. But first, let's run through a quick introduction of those on the show for tonight. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86. Next up, we have our own master of social media, the one and only Green-Eyed Music Lover. Green, I hope you're doing well. How has the week treated you so far?
Really, really good, and I'm actually going to announce it kind of for the whole Focus Fire Chat family. I've kind of been dropping hints in different places, but Julie and I are under contract, and we're going to close on our very first home here in a less than a month now. We got the inspection done. The contract is set in stone. The only thing that will stop us from getting the house now is ourselves, and if we just freak out and change our minds, which I doubt is going to happen. So lots of crazy things have been happening, and I've been super busy with that. But today was the inspection, and we got an all clear for it, so I'm in good mood.
Nice. That's always... That
is awesome.
Yeah, that's always great hearing. So, oh, man, I'm trying to remember. We've been in our house for 8 years now, 7 years.
Yeah,
and it was still
it's stressful to get to that point.
It is. Like I remember when we first purchased our house, and like the weird combo of stress and adrenaline rushing, because you know it's not a small purchase.
No, and then you have you have to deal with like the loan officer and then the broker.
Yeah, we're sorry.
And then the inspector.
We're sorry for that. I'll apologize for my coworkers on that one.
Oh my gosh. Our loan officer worked his tail off for us. Nice. We literally, to tell you how fast this has happened, last Tuesday, Julie went and did this first-time homeowners class. We weren't even trying to buy it. Like, we were learning about how to buy a house. We hadn't even started to try to buy a house yet. And by Friday, after that Tuesday night class at like 9 p.m., by Friday, we had our loan approval.
Nice.
This Wednesday, we had our contract. So we've done this in less than 2 weeks from start to finish.
Yeah, and I know in that area too. How's the market though? Is it pretty volatile? Is it pretty fast paced?
It is. It is a fast paced market, but we're qualifying for a very specific type of housing that not a lot of people tend to qualify for. So that gave us a leg up.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, it's been a whirlwind, and that is 100% my wife. She's done this all by herself in a lot of ways, because she's had to do a lot of the financing stuff and all of the loan stuff, and she's been talking to people left and right, and she's a beast. She's an utter beast.
That's awesome. It's just so awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And, you know, of course, as you can probably imagine, when we talk about Halo, we are going to just hand over the complete, all of the reins to our good friend pensHALO. Pens, how are you? How are you doing? Glad to have you back, because I don't know what we'd do if you weren't here.
I don't know why you guys keep having me back, but I'm glad to be.
We love you. That's why.
Well, thank you. And yeah, trusting me with the keys. It's like, really? Okay,
don't wreck it.
It's okay. It's a short bus. We'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, Pins, you have experience with tanks, right? It's pretty similar.
Oh, yeah.
We have really low turn. We have a really low turn ratio, and we don't move really fast. So
that's only if Justin's
wrong.
here, not here.
Well, considering I drove a 60-ton tank an hour, which is an awesome feeling, by the way. You're yeah. I won't just go off on that, but no, it's been a long week. Glad it's over.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of glad to be here as a nice break. And like I said, I'm always up for talking Halo. So
well, we enjoy having you here.
Yeah, definitely. So real quick, let's run through standard intros, and then we'll jump right into it. In our last Extra Lore episode, we took a brief look at Dishonored. If you ever miss an episode and would like to catch up, please be sure to check out FocusFireChat.com for archives, articles, and links to the other aspects of Focus Fire Chat. If you don't mind, please rate and, if you can, review the show on iTunes, Podbean, or whichever podcasting app you use to enjoy podcasts. Reviews in particular are extremely helpful as they help us show up on charts, and that helps others find the FFC community. To those of you who have already taken the time to leave us a review, thank you. As many of you already know, Focus Fire Chat is a cross-community gathering where the intent is to offer a week-long, in-depth view of a particular subject from within the lore of Destiny and other games. With the Extra Lore series, we delve into a game series other than Destiny for a full month, giving the group a chance to get a feel for the other games that our community loves to play. As with the normal chat topics, Extra Lore is decided by the community through a monthly poll. After the month's discussion has come to an end, we get together to stream a high-level summary of the chat for those who are unable to participate. If you're a fan of lore in all its various forms, be sure to also check out thelorenetwork.com, where you can find a wide variety of some amazing content that covers a number of different titles and mediums. Extra Lore for February is going to be a discussion on the lore of Nier, so be sure to jump into the Discord server and weigh in on that conversation. With all that out of the way, Pins, where do you think the best place to start is when looking for a really basic understanding of the Spartan program from Halo?
Okay. All right. So, again, talk about the Spartans and mainly the entire Spartan program and its history, which is more, everyone knows about the 2s, the Spartan 3s, and the 4s, but the Spartans actually go back much farther than that. The one thing that I want to just mention here before we go too far down this road, especially with the Spartan 2 and Spartan 3 programs, there is a lot of mention in discussions about those programs about ethical and moral behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And I do it too. You have a tendency to use those generally. And in reality, they're really two separate items. Ethics are both are used to determine right, wrong, good, bad in its simplest terms. But one is based on a set of rules that are set down. Doctors, lawyers, they have codes of ethics to follow. Morals are more personal beliefs. Now, they may be based upon stuff like a religious tenet or legal ethics, or medical ethics, things of that nature. But it is a personal belief. That's the morality part. Ethical, again, is based upon set rules. So you can have something that's ethical but is exceedingly questionable on a moral standpoint, and vice versa. So you can't go through a talk about the history of the Spartans without that coming up, and kind of put that out there.
Halsey making some of the decisions she made, the military making their decisions. Yeah, there's going to be some questionable things.
Yeah, and I'll put this out there now. Whenever you're talking about the Spartan program, I'm going to really make an effort. You can't talk about it without mentioning Catherine Halsey. Mm-hmm. I am going to try not to get distracted on that and go down that path because...
What? There's no rabbit hole there.
No.
We did a whole episode on it.
It's a black hole. It's what it is. It'll suck me in and I won't. That's what'll happen. Okay.
If you'd like to hear that episode, check out one of our former episodes with pensHALO, where we talk explicitly for about 3 hours about Catherine Halsey.
Yes, and we didn't even really get all the way.
Yeah, no, we didn't.
All right. So the roots of the Spartan program actually in the Halo universe actually go back up through the 20th century and even into the second century. Back when humanity had started to colonize Sol, our solar system, it was discovered that interplanetary travel put a lot of stress on the human body. So to help cope with that, certain augmentations were given to those spacefarers. Of course, as you have expansion, which happens every time in human history, when you have the colonies at some point in time start to garner their own beliefs and values, and mainly what you started to see in the 22nd century were political factions based upon either communistic ideals, which were known as the Kozloviks, and then the Freedom Movement, which is more of a fascist type ideal. You ended up with a massive civil war that started. And of course, the military, looking for an advantage, started the augmentations that were given just to space travelers were looking to give that to their soldiers to make them better, stronger, faster. Of course, at the time, they were any type of augmentation was, think of it this way: steroids, adrenaline shots, things of that nature. Nothing really on the biochemical level. It was, I guess that would be chemical for steroids, but no like surgeries for augmentations. So once at that point in time, once they got through those part of the interplanetary wars, that's kind of when you started to have the next big wave of colonization, which is what would become the inner colonies. Hold on, I'm sorry here. So it was in 2321 that Oni started what they deemed the Orion Project, and it was named after the Greek hero Orion. And its aim was to build upon the research done before on bioengineering and things of that nature to create better, stronger, and faster soldiers. Their initial batch was 5 candidates. They were all volunteers from the military forces, and they went through a number of testing and augmentations. Now, there's no specifics to what type of augmentation they did, but the results really weren't there, and eventually the project was declared ineffective and it was shut down. Now, one thing to note is every member of that experiment, within a year after they were returned back to their units, they all so.
Was it just because of the adult aspect of it at that point? Because I'm trying to remember. I'm remembering back from reading some of the Halo books that the augmentations didn't really work with them. They weren't able to handle it, or
there's not a lot written about that particular time. There's not a lot of stuff in Halo lore about that particular time, but while there's no specifics, it would be safe to say that they probably started moving beyond just the basics, like I said, steroids or adrenaline shots, and getting into some of the enhancements that you would later see in the Orion Project, that founding. And it was probably that they didn't have the technology hadn't advanced enough, and they were dealing with highly experimental drugs that, and because it was experimental, they probably had no baseline. So.
Real quick, Pens, your mic cut out just a little bit there. What happened within a year of their being reintroduced to the unit?
Within a year after they reintroduced to their units, the 5 volunteers all died.
Okay, they all died.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Chat. Okay. Just wanted to call that out. And the other thing to remember with the Orion project was that they didn't have Mjolnirs.
Right.
Well, this was actually pre-Orion.
Oh, okay.
This was pre-Orion, yes, which is actually next. So in 2491, at that point in time, it was the colonial military, which, oddly enough, Oni really wasn't deeply involved at this point. They relaunched Orion. So they did the research, looked at what happened in the past with the 5 soldiers, and wanted to create soldiers who could be deployed behind enemy lines, stop insurgency, things of that. At that point in time, it was headquarters reach. So what they ended up doing, what they did, they started off with 65 test subjects. The type of augmentations that done for the Orion are muscular enhancement, pulmonary respiratory enhancement, tuning, mental augmentations to help learning capabilities, so they could adapt faster to the other changes that were into place. Enhanced motor skills, and things of that nature. Now, unlike that very first test, all 65 of those candidates actually made it all the way through training. And in January of 2496 was the first time a organized group of super soldiers were deployed. It was part of Operation Charlemagne,
which operation?
Charlemagne.
Okay.
Which was that was in response to, at this point in time, you started to see, again, colonial secessionists. They had initiated a series of attacks on colony, and this was the response to it. Mm-hmm. Their attack had resulted in numerous deaths, civilian, government officials, things of that nature. So like I said, in January, that was the only time all 65 were deployed en masse, and they scored a decisive victory with casualties. So it wasn't long after that that the UNSC decided to up the funding, and they gained another 100 candidates. So throughout the life of Orion, the individual successes spurred all kinds of stories about the super soldiers. One of the big scores that they have is they were actually able to recover a non-official list of undercover operatives in positions of power within the colonial military administration. And so they were able to purge out enough separatist sympathizers as well, which was also a really big coup for the Orion team. What ended up happening was the insurgents started to learned how to react, and became more difficult to root out. And their bombings and things of that nature, they became more effective to avoid conflict or meeting up with some of the Orion team, or coming against that. This, of course, spurred the UNSC to spend more money and add more candidates to the Orion program. At its highest, there were 300 members of Orion. And one of them was a soldier from New Chicago, Avery Johnson, who anyone who's ever played Halo knows who Johnson is.
I know what they like.
Oh, my.
Mm-hmm. What did it say? 60 tons of divine intervention?
Yeah. Oh, my God. Divine intervention.
Was it? If giving is love, you can call me stupid.
Oh, my goodness. Pens. I don't know if I can handle it. Yeah, it's
for a brick, he flew pretty good.
Pretty good.
Oh, God.
Okay.
Divine intervention.
So yes, before I go down that road, but one of the things that they started to see, and you're right. Without Johnson, Halo 2 specifically, what they started to see though in the late 25th century was that some of the members of Orion, even though there was a ton of success, there were some flaws that started to come out. There was a lot of PTSD that was appearing. A lot of the soldiers, latent sympathies towards the rebels. So they were becoming, they weren't as effective. And they even started having those that went through some of the later batches, some that went through augmentation. After they would go through augmentation, there'd be a post-training. They refused to do that. And so they would be incarcerated. And so even with all the success that Orion had, scientists kind of still felt that they fell short of the hope. They thought that even as good as they were, they thought they'd be better.
Okay.
And again, because what would later be determined as because of the candidates, the genetic modifications and the immunosuppressants that were supposed to be put in place, they failed.
Okay.
So you started trying to have a lot of physical problems, a lot of mental problems, and, break down. So this was kind of marking the tail end of the Orion project. One of the last major operations was Operation Kaleidoscope. The goal was to eliminate a leader of the Secessionist Union, one of the groups, and by the name of Gerald Ander. And the assassination was carried out by Corporal Avery Johnson. Because he was such a key leader, it actually broke that portion, the Secessionist Union.
Mm-hmm.
But it really didn't pacify the outer colonies, but it did put a big dent. So as by 2506, Orion was there were 165 remaining. Some of them were really starting to show problems, degenerative medical issues, physical mental issues. Those that were still able to contribute and function normally were reassigned to other special operations. Again, one of those was Avery Johnson. He continued to serve until he was in his 70s when he died, which was 4 decades after Orion was ended. In many cases, some of the issues that the Orion candidate showed was stemmed as what became known as Boren syndrome.
Okay, what is that? Like, is it just specifically because of all of this, or like what are the symptoms of it?
It's a neurological condition. It was used mainly as a cover-up by ONI.
Okay.
Tumors, migraine, this things of that nature. Again, many of the side effects that were that came from the Orion program, the physical problems, the degenerative problems, those kind of breakdowns, they were all kind of lumped in as Boren syndrome. And there was some talk that that's actually, those augmentations are why Johnson may not have been infected with the flood at the end of Halo CE. I don't think that's actually ever been verified. I think that was a fan theory, but it's one all of us love to actually kind of hold on because it just makes Johnson fast. So at that point in time, with the cancellation of the Orion program, what ended up happening is ONI and the UNSC, they kept tinkering, researching, and whatnot, but they weren't willing to spend the money on it. Especially because while they had a lot of success, they felt that it wasn't enough to justify keep going with it, especially once you started seeing problems with, you've got these essentially super soldiers that are flawed.
Right.
You couldn't control, especially, if you had some that started sympathizing with the rebels. What happens if they decided to go over the rebels? So what ended up happening is 4 years after the closeout of Orion, a scientist by the name of Elias Carver. I'm sorry, this was late in the 25th century. Elias Carver came up with this. He was a scientist who worked with ONI and came up with this finding that predicted an outbreak of major hostility throughout the colonized human colonized space.
Okay.
To the point where millions would die. It would last years, and the only way to really stop it would be to try to nip it in the bud sooner rather than later. It was more predictive kind of thing.
Kind of like somebody we know in the Destiny universe who predicted that the darkness would come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Kind of.
Yeah, but a little
Kinda
bit more
sorta, yeah.
wishy-washy, too, because it was a little political in nature as well with this
Oh,
particular individual.
okay.
Yeah, and Oni actually did their own evaluation, and they did their own research, and they found that the findings matched up based
Okay.
upon. Now they were still basing it upon Carver's theory,
Mm-hmm.
but it showed that eventually there would be a massive war. Now this kind of made Carver a darling of the UNSC and the Colonial Military Administration, so he did a lot of speeches and went and visited colleges and essentially was like a paid speaker for that. And he actually would become very high in demand. So in 2507, he would be speaking at a college and a social mixer where a particular 15-year-old prodigy who had read everything up on Carver came up to him and told him that while the theory was right, he was using the parameters. Carver was
Okay.
basing everything off of 7. This
shocker.
This prodigy said, no, you needed a 18.
Which
What
number?
was it?
16.
Okay.
So,
And this prodigy did that in their head.
yes, pretty much. Obviously Carver didn't really like being called out by, a 15-year-old, no matter the fact that they were working on their second doctorate at the time, and just kind of straight up dismissed the person. 3 guesses on who it is, and the first.
Halsey?
Yes.
This doesn't end well, though, for any
No.
of them.
No, it doesn't. Not in the least. It is, like I said before, you kind of have to touch on Halsey, but I'll try not to go down the rabbit. One of the things that Halsey said, at that time, even she admitted in her journal that she was a bit brash. And
She was young.
Well, yeah.
Well, and the consequence of this confrontation is kind of something that haunts her, too.
Yes. It ended up that I think within a couple of years after that meeting, Carver killed himself. What he started to question was, did he actually predict that this was going to happen no matter what?
Or did he cause it?
Yes, that was the whole thing. And he could not reconcile that. And it drove him to the point where he would kill himself. So, quick background on Halsey. She was born in Outer 20. Obviously, she was a prodigy. She attended the Endymion Gifted Academy, which was her home world. She caught the eye of the Dean of Biological Science at the Cultured Browning University on the World of Circumstance.
She was born on, you said the outer colonies?
Yes.
Okay.
That's one of the neat ironies of the whole thing.
Oh God, yeah.
She came from the outer colonies, yet once we kind of get into it, almost all the Spartans were kidnapped that were Spartan 2s were kidnapped from outer colony worlds. It's probably more of a coincidence than anything based upon how they were chosen and the method that they used to choose them. But it's still one of those interesting little notes there about that. So like I said, in 2501, the dean essentially offered her a trip to the university where she would start studying. They completely funded her education. He said she completed her second thesis, and it was at this point that she met the meeting with Carver happened. It was also at that meeting that she caught the eye of Oni officer Captain Michael Stanforth, who eventually would be Admiral Stanforth in charge of Oni Division 3.
Okay.
Which is the one that actually was in charge of the Spartan program. The funny thing was, Halsey was actually looking to do research in AI, and that's really what she was trying to get funding for. How to make AI more effective, how do they last long. Halsey was looking for funding for her AI research. Well, before she would be given that funding, the UNSC said, okay, we need you to proof this model. The model that they wanted her to proof was Carver's. Halsey being Halsey decided to evaluate it using Carver's model, which was using the basis of 7, and she also ran it using her basis of 16. When these ran, Carver's model showed that using the 7 parameters would show that there would be war would break out within 20 years. Her model of using 16 said it would be much sooner, within a decade, and then that the minimum would be 30 years of war and 5 billion dead. The maximum would be pretty much a new another dark age.
That's intense. And this is to the point where they were already spread across the galaxy, well, not the galaxy, but Sol specifically, right? They were in the outer colonies and everything.
I think
this point.
They were actually. I mean, they were kind of across the galaxy
Were they?
too.
They had
harvest planets, and that's where the outer colonies. That's why part of the because remember, this is the inner versus outer colonies. The innies and the outers were they were starting to run into resource crunch. Really, is also what was going on too.
Okay.
So it's a taxation situation, kind of. The outer colonies weren't getting the prestigious treatment that the inner colonies would get or Earth would get, but they were providing a lot of. It's a pretty standard imperial conquest expansion thing, and then your outer colonies start getting a little jealous because they're doing all the hard work, and the inner colonies are reaping all the benefits, which is where the model that Pins is kind of talking about. That's kind of where you see the political dangers, and that's why ultimately the original thinker commits suicide, right? Is because he's like, did I create this problem, or did I just recognize the pattern?
Yeah. And not really being a scientist, but you can kind of see where anyone who puts that kind of theory out that says, okay, we're predicting this. To avoid it, we need to do this. Okay, well, the question is, in your actions of doing it, do you actually cause what's occurring or not?
Is your prediction a self-fulfilling prophecy?
Yeah, pretty much. So, and just one thing of note, the initial wave of colonization and what became the inner colonies, the UNSC and United Earth Government actually had a very tight control over who was colonizing, which made them a little less likely to be rebellious. There still was some, but not nowhere nearly as much. The second wave, it really wasn't the best and brightest anymore. It was those people who were looking to get away from something, escape from something, who were bristling underneath the control of the UNSC or the UEG. So it was a little bit more ripe for rebellion.
Well, and you also had, they were being moved out to agrarian. They didn't need the best and brightest because they had machines to do the thinking. They just needed muscle. They just needed people to pick up stuff and move it.
Mm-hmm. So Halsey goes ahead and presents this to Oni, and what she found out at that time was that Oni actually had redone everything, essentially mirrored her work. Or let me back up here. Oni had been working on this for about 3 or 4 years and spent a ton of money, and essentially came up with the same idea that she did, that it was going to happen a lot sooner, and it was going to be a lot worse than what Carver had predicted. So this is just my opinion. It's my belief that Oni did this deliberately. Someone young and idealistic like Halsey, who was, driven, and especially one that they wanted to bring in, but they knew they couldn't straight recruit her. They essentially needed her to convince herself to be recruited. So, yeah, I think they essentially even against...
You mean Oni had an ulterior motive? What?
Shocker.
Shocking. I mean, a lot of her mentors and everything really didn't want to be, Halsey being Halsey, decided she was going to do that. So, while she did also do work on AI work, which was what her initial thing was, what she did also do was review the Orion program and to see what its shortcomings were and how you avoid those shortcomings in the future. Now, this is where lays the entire ground the Spartan 2 program. And it's important to note that at this time, this was all still theoretical. And Halsey herself really wasn't sure if this was the right way to go. So she had 3 main points. The first one was the Orion candidates were too. At that point in time, the body wasn't able to adapt to all of the augmentations that had to be done. So the only way to avoid that was, and the fragmentation, especially what happened later on, was they had to use, a group had to be of an age where their DNA was more malleable and quicker to adjust and to repair. The second part was the genetic screening of the Orion project, the Orion candidate. They just called out for volunteers, came in, did some real basic tests, blood tests, compatibility, things of that nature, but not the real in-depth kind of research and evaluation that if you want to get the most out of patient, do. And now the question was, how do you get this? And her thought was to use the outer colony vaccination program, because the outer colonies, they didn't like anything, they were very much against, the inner colonies, all the rules for the Colonial Administration Authority, the UNSC. But the one thing they would do is accept vaccinations. So you had this massive database of most of the entire population of the outer colonies that you could use. You could set the standards and then just run a program to find those people that match that standard.
Mm-hmm.
Because this isn't a conspiracy theorist wet dream at all.
No, not in the least.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Right, but at the same time, it's from a data standpoint, she's correct.
Oh yeah, and the last thing was, like I said, it was found that a lot of the sympathies to the insurgents, again, to the point where some of them refused to participate in some of the post-augmentation training and were jailed. So to avoid that, the candidates needed to be indoctrinated. Now, this is not brainwashing. It is more strict training and development and things of that nature, although you might argue that is a form of brainwashing in and of itself. But specifically, to the traditional brainwashing kind of thing would not work, because people can break that or may break that. So it's more of instilling a belief and whatnot, which, in all fairness, that's what most militaries do during camp. They indoctrinate you. It's training. It's, if you do stuff good, get stuff. The basics of, if you do well, you get stuff. If you do poorly, you're doing push-ups forever.
Right. But the difference here is that that's not being done to 5-year-olds.
Correct. Now, in closeout of this, based upon everything, what they needed to do was get young children to do this, because they're young enough that their DNA is malleable. It would repair much better. They would accept the augmentations better. Or they'd be able to adapt them faster. And then training from a young age, you could indoctrinate them. Now, and I remember saying this in the hall, I'm going to say it again. One of the key things, and this is in Halsey's journal, she admitted that from a purely logical and scientific sense, everything made sense. This is what you needed to do. But she herself said that there was so much to reflect on. I need time to think. There were serious moral and ramifications to this. I take it as she wasn't fully convinced to move this. There are some who disagree with me, but that's my thought on it. Now, as a weird twist of fate, about 10 days after she completed her operation, there was a suicide bombing for Freedom and that detonated a nuclear explosive that was packed in cadmium, which is a poisonous metal, on a city on the planet Memorial. This killed 2 million people, injured 8 million more, and essentially rendered the planet nearly uninhabitable.
Okay. Can I pause you a second?
Yep.
2 things to clarify. Who detonated it and what planet was it?
I'm sorry. It was the Freedom and Liberation Party. They fell under the umbrella of the insurrectionists.
Okay.
The planet was Mamor, Mamod.
Okay.
And like I said, it killed 2 million, injured 8 million more, and essentially rendered the planet uninhabitable, because all the radioactive, because the cadmium that was thrown out, essentially made
it was like a super dirty
poisonous
bomb.
and poisonous, and would lead to birth defects for generations to come. Probably best way to describe it would be, imagine the descriptions of what happened at Nagasaki and Hiroshima, but on a planetary scale.
Yikes.
And it's also on a planet that really wasn't super aggressive to anybody, which was
just randomly?
No, the planet was actually loyal to.
Yeah.
That's so much worse.
That's why. That's why in Halsey's journal she like loses her mind in the entry. She's beyond pissed about it because it's. I mean, that's exactly the thing. Is like why?
What monsters? Why would you do that?
Yeah. Her exact quote from this is, "How could they commit such an atrocity? And against those who are supposedly, they are insane. They must be stopped. I have to stop this."
Right.
It is at this point that the urgency of the situation makes Halsey move past any ethical or moral quandary she may have, even though they're still present, to say this has to be done. So, okay. One of the other things that was kind of key to this was secrecy. They had to have secrecy in implementing this program. They'd actually done a pretty decent job with Orion in keeping things secret. This had to be even more so, especially with the whole idea of, okay, you're going to be using children. Well, parents aren't going to give them up, so you have to kidnap them. But if you kidnap a bunch of children, people are going to kind of notice. So how do you do this? Of a flash clone. Now, some of it was Halsey trying to assuage her own guilt over this and to try to give closure to the parents.
By having them die randomly later on because the flash clone didn't last very long?
Yes.
Well, they weren't supposed to last very long.
Right.
There were some that didn't, or some that did.
Oh, really? I thought they all died within the first 2 years.
They were supposed to. There was a couple that was in, was it Evolutions that you get the...
Yes.
Yeah, there's a couple that the Spartans later will go back home and hey, there's a clone there. That's I think the one in particular was wheelchair bound, and then the Spartan commits suicide.
No, actually, that one did not.
No, yeah,
that was Daisy.
Right.
Daisy did not. Yes, okay. That was Daisy 023. No, she didn't commit suicide, but she did return back to the program. Yeah. Another really good description of this would be, and I would recommend if people want to get an idea of impressions from the outer colonies on this, would be go listen to Hunt the Truth, which was an audio podcast done by
Noah.
There was a 2 seasons. Yeah, Noah. Noah Eichen. I can't remember who the person was, but it was Keegan Michael Key played the main character in the first season, and where he was doing interviews and was talking to people who quote knew John, and some of the descriptions like how he got sick right away or real soon when he'd always been healthy and things. Those are the kind of like I said, the clones on average lasted about 2 weeks. Another really good description of this is the opening chapter, Tada, which is the third book in the Kilo 5 trilogy. I am not a big fan of that trilogy for my own reasons, but that opening chapter, which talks about Naomi kidnapping, the after effects of her kidnapping and her family, it's really, really good. It's on par. Travis does that on par with her on Human Weakness, which was in Halo Evidence, and talked about Cortana being tortured by the Gravemind.
Just an amazing.
I would really I would recommend it to get kind of like the other perspective of the parents. Those are the two things that I would say in the Friends. Those are the two places I would recommend people look at. And again, even though Halsey knew this was kind of necessary, she knew that there was no turning back from this. So they went ahead, and she talked to Vice at this point in time is now Vice Admiral Sanforth to move forward on candidate procurement, as they called it. It is also important to note something here. This plan was approved by all of the senior council of ONI.
Keep that in mind.
Keep that in mind, folks. Yeah. There was a lot of people who knew what was going on.
Oh God, Oni!
Oh no! I mean, it's not a surprise what Oni does with
no,
this, but it's still it's one of the major contention points. It's like really you're gonna make that your scapegoat point?
Yeah. So at this point in time, the project actually had not been yet. It was still being called Orion Project Generation 2, which Halsey never liked, frankly. It just was clunky of a name. But the other part of it was it also rang back to what was seen as a failure of a program. So in looking at it, Halsey was always trying to find a program. In the end, because of the initial proposal was approved for the program, and there were 300 candidates. As part of because of that, she chose the name Spartan, mainly because of Thermopylae. And also about the training Spartans underwent, starting at the age of 7, turning into fierce warriors, and how they would inspect their own babies for health, and discard those that weren't, but keep put the ones that were through serious training, which had parallels to what this program was going to do. But Halsey did realize that they needed to have some respect paid to the members of Orion, since they made the groundwork for it. So therefore, it was named the Spartan 2 program.
And that's where the Spartan 2 comes from.
Yes, yeah. I mean, Orions are sometimes called Spartan 1. They're officially known as Orion candidates. The Spartan 2s, it's actually the Spartan program, and like I said, the 2 was added on as a nod to the Orions, because it wasn't the first super soldier program.
Okay.
Again, in 2511, the program was originally 300 candidates. Due to funding cutbacks, this was cut back to 150, and then by 2517, it was cut to 75. So in the years prior to that, ONI would evaluate all of the 150 that they had authorization. Halsey could not do this all by herself. A number of different members of her team. She did go out and to do some of them, and as most people will know, one of her first stop was to the planet of Eridanus 2 to meet candidate 117, John, who was beating everyone up on a game of King of the Hill.
Oh God.
It's one of the best scenes ever.
It's actually really both the Fall of Reach and the comic book adaptation of that both do it really well, and those are the only ones out there that exist. There's rumbling.
Chat was asking about that, and I was like, it does okay.
Okay, so in August of 2517, the 75 kidnapped placed with clones. They were all drugged, put in cryo, and taken to Reach, to FleetCom military, where they were briefed by Catherine Halsey, Chief Petty Officer Franklin Mendez, AI, who was assisting Halsey in this, by the name of Deja, who was a dumb AI. Real quick, difference between a smart AI is one created from a human brain. A dumb AI is created from essentially just an electrical impulses, and it's truly artificial. There's no organic basic in it. Also, a smart AI has an unlimited learning capacity until it gets about 7 years old. 7 years, at which point in time it essentially thinks itself to death. The memory fills up. Dumb AIs are experts in one very specific category: military history, medical, things of that nature. Deja was a dumb AI that Halsey was using to help train the candidates. During this meeting, Deja had actually suggested maybe they should go ahead and see about brainwashing the children. Halsey overrode this, saying that she felt that lying to the children come back and hurt them. It was better to tell them the truth, or as much of the truth that they could, because everything that had happened to them, you needed to lay some basis of trust. And I'm going to read this. This is a quote from The Fall of Reach. This was her speech to the 75 candidates. As per Naval Code 45812, you are named Spartan 2. You have been called upon to serve. You will be trained, and you will become the best we can make of you. You will be the protectors of Earth and all. This will be hard to understand, but you cannot return to your parents. This place will become your home. Fellow trainees will be your family now. Training will be difficult. There will be a great deal of hardship on the road ahead, but I know you will make it. Rest now. We begin tomorrow. So,
that's from the.
That's Fall of Reach.
Fall of Reach.
Fall of Reach.
Okay.
As another side note, if you're looking, like, the Fall of Reach is a great resource for the basic training of the Spartan 2s and kind of like the early days of the Spartans. I mean, Halsey's journal has a lot of great information on some of the stuff, but the Fall of Reach is where you get most of like what they actually went through, and it also details some of the training. In essence, other than the fact that they were kids and getting hit by stun batons, their first day of basic training was not much different than my first day of basic training when I was in
Yeah.
A lot of calisthenics, a lot of running, some classroom work, and then, essentially a competition. And then, so again, they went through a bunch of calisthenics. Deja did some training with them and specifically meant to discuss the Spartans at the, and then at that point in time, they were taken to an obstacle course and divided into teams. That would be their teams moving forward. And the first team would win. Last team wouldn't eat for that day. And on a total side,
no food.
Yes.
Nothing motivates like no food.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Except for the Spartans that were really good at stealing stuff.
Yes, which all of them were actually. Yeah,
they were all scrappy kids. It was gosh, this is all Fall of Reach. Like Fall of Reach is just like it's probably one of my favorite books.
Oh yeah, just I'll make one note on the training. At this point in time, Blue Team together, the first iteration of Blue Team, consisting of John 117, Kelly 087, and Sam 034. That was the original Blue Team. They're paired off. John took off on his own you had to run the obstacle course, then ring the bell. He took off there, but Sam and Kelly struggled and they ended up last. So even though John was first, his team ended up last, so they lost. Which was, people look at, and even I do it at times, you kind of idolize John because you play him in the games. But really, as a kid, he was a bit of a bully and a bit of a arrogant kid that you kind of saw there. But that was broken. He was broken to that real.
And that was mostly thanks to Mendez, honestly.
Yes.
Most of the reason that Spartan 2s have the attitude that they do is of Mendez's involvement, which is another character you encounter in Hunt for the Truth, actually.
Yes. Voiced by Stacy Keach.
Really good.
Yeah, it was. Okay. So that was their daily schedule. They got up early, calisthenics, classroom training, and then obstacle. They would have all kinds of twists, like stun mines on the obstacle course. During drills, there'd be snipers with paint darts, and if you got shot, you'd kind of be punished. They also did, later on, and this is something in the book as well, they went on wilderness training. And the way they did it was they handed out fragments of a map to all of the candidates and then dropped them off individually with the idea of, okay, you have to rally to I think it was a Condor dropship.
Oh, yeah, this one.
The last one has to walk back.
Oh, gosh.
So
this is where you see John's growth, actually.
Yes.
Where he starts taking care of his team, or?
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much.
All of the Spartans.
He doesn't just his team, he takes care of.
Yep. He kind of initiates, like, as they're flying in, he's able to signal everyone, says, we're going to head for this location, like the one big landmark. They all meet. They match their maps up. Some were duplicates, some weren't, and they start moving on towards the Condor. They get to the Condor. It's no one in uniform, and no, it's not booby trapped.
That's right. No, yeah. That was.
But they weren't in uniform. They thought that maybe they had stolen a dropship, or they were enemies and things of that nature. The soldiers there were there deliberately that way to try essentially to test the candidates, see what they would do. And the candidates would lure one guy away. Kelly did, because she was the fastest of them. Came across Sam, who was pretending he was hurt. And then the candidates jumped the guy and beat him up and took his stun baton. One of the things that's mentioned in Fall of Reach for their training is they also talked about wolves and how wolves would bring down larger prey because they work together as a pack. They did this again, and essentially they badly hurt everybody who was guarding that pelican or the condor, and then John contacted Deja, who was able to explain how to get the pilot to return. And it's important to note that John had everyone file on board, and he was the last person to get on board. They go back. He ends up getting. He's in Mendez's office with Halsey there, trying to explain his actions. And when Mendez and Halsey go to talk, they said, "What are we going to do about him?" And they said, "Promote him." And he was the first one to actually be granted the rank of petty officer.
Nice.
So, So throughout their training, there was a lot of talk about who was the Spartan program. Kurt was named. Jerome, Kurt 051, who would eventually be put in charge of the Spartan 3 program. Jerome 092, who, if you play Halo Wars, he's one of the Spartans on Red Team in Halo Wars. And Fred 104, which, yeah. And of course, no surprise, Halsey had John as leader. That's what it. So their training would intensify. I'm sorry, Green, were you going to say something?
I was just going to have you repeat that last little bit because you cut out one more time.
Oh, sorry about that. So, like I said, there were a number of Spartan. There were debates on who would be the leader of Spartan. Halsey, of course, had John in mind, although Kurt, Jerome, and Fred were all named as potential leaders. And all of them would lead Spartan teams on their own within Halo lore.
Fred even actually led Blue Team.
Yep, that he did. Fred, while John, throughout the span of the actual games, Fred, Linda, and Kelly formed Blue Team and worked with who's. Kurt had his death faked, and he was the one who was put in charge of their training. And Jerome actually was leader of Red Team, the one that is with the Spirit of Fire for anyone who plays Halo Wars. So at the age of 14, all the candidates participated in the Astra augmentation. So the actual augmentations that they went through. Sorry, I'm just trying to find where I have the list of augmentations that the Spartan 2s went through.
Oh, yeah. The massive list of... Well, and real quick, while you're looking that up, too, this is the experimentations that Halsey had requested advice from a friend on, and she disguised the request as a theoretical, and I can't remember, did she say monkeys or did she say human? I want to say she didn't even say humans. Bonobos.
Bonobos, chimpanzee.
And like even her I keep wanting to say companion, but her co-thinker, God, man, I just blanked on the word that I need to use there. Her peer, God, he was like, this is dangerous. I'm really glad this is just theoretical and you're not actually thinking of doing this. Like, and that was when he thought it was with monkeys. So yeah, it was, this round of experimentations was, or augmentations, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I kind of threw the link in chat so people look at it because there's a lot of information here. They did occipital capillary reversal which was which was for visual processing. Essentially make their vision sharper, more sensitive. The risk on that was the subjects could face retinal rejection, blindness. There was carbide ceramic ossification, which is advanced ceramic materials are grafted onto the skeleton. Kind of in the way that Wolverine got his adamantium, maybe not quite that far.
It's pretty accurate though, because that's also why the Spartan 2s are so much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
They had their skeletal structure pretty much broken down and then reconfigured, for lack of a better example.
So, I mean, there was chances of bone pulverization with that. They had a thyroid implant that would be essentially release human growth hormone to boost growth of skeletal and tissues. There was a chance of elephantiasis, and it would suppress sexual drive in them. There was a number of muscular enhancements, growth hormones, protein complexes to increase muscle strength and density. And there was a chance of fatal cardiac arrest from that. And then superconducting fabrication of dendrites, which essentially is something to enhance the reflexes by 300%. Some of the subjects could contact, but the risk was you could contract Parkinson's disease from that. So, of the 75 that actually underwent the augmentation, 33 came out of it as able to continue serving. The others either exceedingly deformed or died, or essentially rejected augmentation. Now, some of them in the book Fall of Reach, there's a memorial service where the caskets are launched out in space, but it ended up that for some of those that didn't really happen. Mm-hmm. Those that had died, quote unquote, were being held in stasis to
learn from.
Well, not learn from, but try to rehabilitate.
Oh yeah. There were some, but some of the ones that died, they also kept for research purposes to see what had gone wrong. Because there was what's her face from Hunt the Truth was one of the ones that they tried to rehabilitate.
Yes. Well, no, Ilsa Zane, she was a Spartan.
Oh no, yeah, that's right. Oh, I'm thinking the one that was the intelligence officer one, that he had his body like completely destroyed.
Oh, that was Fahad.
Yes.
He had contracted essentially Parkinson's because of it. Because he was shaking so bad.
Yeah.
So, Black Team was one that was totally rehabilitated by Oni. Saren Osman is actually, who is now head of Oni. She was actually Saren's. Her body rejected the augmentations, and she was rehabilitated under the eye of then head of Oni, Margaret Parangosky, to kind of become a protege.
Such a stand-up person.
Oh yeah, she's a lovely person. Not going there. Okay, so yeah, it just needless. Let me just for everyone listening or in chat. Margaret Parangosky is, again, she was head of Oni, so this whole project she approved it. She had a lot of conflict. She disliked Catherine Halsey quite a bit, but Halsey was kind of protected. If you read the Kilo 5 trilogy, you'll get a definite feel for Parangosky, and also actually if you read Ghosts of Onyx, in that opening scene, they talk about the creation of the Spartan 3 program, and Parangosky is in that conversation. Her hands are stained with the same blood as Halsey, but she kind of doesn't get any blame, which, yeah, that I have an issue with. So, back to the Spartan 2s. After the augmentations, after the Spartan 2s, they were...
So after Project Aster, yeah.
Yes, after Project Aster, they were Okay, and this is they were put to rehab, and I can't find the name of the ship right now. And you kind of get there's a great scene in that part of the novel. It describes the augmentation and how, from John's point of view, how things seem off. Things um, he took it's like he was in a weight room and like weights didn't seem right. He had to up the amount to be able to get to get the same feel, the same kind of workout. He noticed things seemed to be moving slower, so he took a pin out of a dumbbell set or a barbell set and held it at like 1 meter above the deck and dropped it at 1G and timed it and figured out, okay, is gravity actually working properly? And it was. Mind you, he did this all in his head. So they went through they went through a bunch of additional training. There was a point in time that their augmentations had gotten, all the Spartans could run about 55 miles an hour, with Kelly 087 actually moving faster than that, but she was always one of the fastest Spartans. They could lift like 3 times their body weight without any aid of any kind of exoskeleton. It wasn't long after their augmentation that they moved into the abandoned titanium mines in Reach for their training, because they were so overpowered that they would easily defeat the trainers, and I think they may have actually killed one, if I remember correctly.
Well, I know that one of them killed him, or one of them died because of the suits.
No, that wasn't a trainer. That was something. Was
was
a
that
tester?
Was that just a tech? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I do remember that one. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, the Spartan 2s had gotten so strong that their trainers had to use exoskeletons with stun rounds in like Gatling gun type thing, play capture the flag. And it's great because the Spartans would go out and like do their own, like steal the equipment that they need to win, like the sneak suits, cables, all this other stuff. They could actually dent the exoskeleton by hitting it. They were that strong. So after that, with their training, they initially had been developed to fight the insurrectionists, but it was not long after that the Covenant hit Harvest.
Harvest, yeah.
Harvest, and so their training, everything was accelerated to fight this new enemy. But the Spartans' actual first mission was back to John's old stomping, to kidnap a rebel leader by the name of Watts, who had defected sometime like in the, I can't even remember how long, but he had defected. And John picked 6 team members, Linda, Kelly, Fred being 3 of them. The rebels were hidden in base in an asteroid. They snuck their way on a freighter that was going to there. They hid in the water storage location, popped their way out, and dressed in just essentially they had special suits. They did not have they were in special Oni sneak suits, covered up by just mechanics coveralls, and they snuck in. They found Watts, had a major shootout, and kidnapped him and got away, with the only injury being John, who was shot in the ribs. It wasn't long after that one of the other things at Halsey was the Mjolnir armor was a set of armor that had an undersuit and then an oversuit. The undersuit was electrically charged to enhance muscle strength. And again, there was other armor over it as well. It was all designed to help enhance the Spartans' already abilities, give them a full heads-up display, allow them to be totally sealed off, and either whether it's from the vacuum of space or underwater, despite the fact that if you walk 2 feet in the water in any Halo game, you die. Yeah, fall from space, no problem. Step in 2 feet of water, die. Okay. So let's see here. Yeah. Okay. Here it is. It's Mjolnir was a powered exoskeleton. Again, just to be able to take care of all of the to enhance the physical capabilities of a Spartan. The initial armor was given to the Spartan 2s was at the Damascus Materials Testing Facility, which was on Tri-Ceti 4. The Spartan 2s, along with Catherine Halsey, had traveled there on a sea destroyer to go there and get their Mjolnir. They ran across a Covenant ship. They did battle, and the UNSC ship took a lot of damage. So they did a kind of like a flyby and dropped the Spartans down. They got them and they fitted them with their Mjolnir armor. Now, Mjolnir armor said it was designed to enhance the Spartans' capabilities. Now, one of the scenes that it's graphic in every iteration I've seen it in is kind of graphic, was a testing video that they showed of having a volunteer go into the Mjolnir armor and try to move. Well, it reacted so much that that the slightest movement caused the armor to move, which started breaking bones.
Yeah, didn't you break his arm doing it?
Yeah.
Oh,
he broke more than his arm.
More than that. It essentially killed him because it started off with a broken arm, but his reaction to it caused the armor to keep reacting.
Mm-hmm. Oh God.
Yeah, he basically broke himself down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's at this point, and this was in, and it was at this point that the Spartans actually had their first casualty.
Yeah.
To get away from in fighting the Covenant ship, the UNSC ship had taken a lot of damage, but it had damaged the Covenant ship with its MAC gun. So the Spartans all went EVA. From the Pelican, they took the missiles from the Pelican dropship and used the integrated thrusters to board the Covenant ship. It was John, Kelly, and Sam. And
Rip Sam.
So yeah, so it was John.
It's
Kelly,
so bad. It's Sam. Sam feels so bad for Sam.
What happened was they were moving their way through towards the reactor, and they came across jackals for the first time. And one of them charged up a plasma shot, and it would have hit John if Sam wouldn't have knocked him out of the way. Well, the problem is when that happened, it breached Sam's armor. So, and with breached armor, he would never survive in the vacuum. So John was forced to order him to stay behind and to protect the missile heads, so the Covenant wouldn't disable them. It destroyed the entire ship.
And Sam was declared MIA.
Yes,
because Spartans don't die.
Mm-hmm. So this was the first. That was the first instance of combat with Spartan 2s. It was widely held that Spartan 2s could hold their own and were a force multiplier of a massive force multiplier, even when paired with normal Marines or Army, to the point where they could defeat the Covenant on the ground. The only thing they couldn't do is defeat them in space. And the Covenant fleet had a massive advantage. So now there were only 33 Spartans, and eventually casualties started to mount. There was Cal 131. She died in a mission with it to assassinate a prophet. Anyone who has seen the clip, the babysitter from Halo Legends, that was actually one of the better stories. That's one there. And then also, I can't remember right now. I can't find the name, but Also, as a Spartan died protecting Catherine Halsey before she was captured by the Covenant.
Yeah.
Later rescued by
Team
John.
Osiris. Or no, was it Team Osiris
No.
that rescued? Oh, yeah,
No.
you're right.
No. Yeah, no. Okay. So it was during this time that Oni wanted to, like I said, Catherine Halsey had rubbed a lot of people at Oni the wrong way. She was brilliant. The Spartan 2 program was a success, but there were people who realized that they weren't enough. So a lot of the senior members of Oni, Colonel Ackerson, Mark Parangoski, and a few others, met to essentially form the basis of the Spartan 3 program. They were not going to. Now, one thing, Halsey had planned a second wave of Spartan 2s, but at that point in time, the population had dropped too much. They really didn't have enough people, and also the funding was the cost of the Spartan 2 program was astronomical. The cost of a suit of Mjolnir armor was the equivalent of a destroyer in the UNSC. So everything was really expensive. So obviously, Oni and the UNSC wanted to make, they wanted the Spartans, but they didn't want to spend as much. Hence, the Spartan 3 program. Spartan 3 program was, like I said, was one that was really, the idea came up with Colonel James Ackerson. It was, again, approved by Parangoski with the whole they would loosen up the tight genetic markers that Halsey had set, and they wouldn't kidnap kids. They would go to orphans, and of the same time, of the same age range of like 4 to 8, to ask them to volunteer, and the idea was they were supposed to be cheaper and more expendable. They would be sent on extremely high risk missions.
Emphasis on the expendable piece.
Yes. Now the lead trainer on this was 051. Oni had arranged an accident to make him seem he had died on a mission, but he was actually put in charge along with Mendez of training the Spartan 3s. Now, there ended up being 3 companies of Spartan 3s: Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. Alpha, so like I said, the whole idea was to make them faster and cheaper. Kurt, who had been given the name Ambrose by to hide that he was a Spartan 2, they had 497 candidates, and 300 became Spartans. They saw action on a number of cities, a number of planets, and they were eventually deployed on an operation called Prometheus to destroy a Covenant shipyard. During that action, all 300 Spartans were killed. They essentially were just overwhelmed. Now, one of the things about the Spartan 3s was Ambrose and Mendez had there still were genetic markers that they were, but they were just looser. But those that actually fit the markers that Catherine Halsey had originally set aside, those Spartans had been extracted from the general population of Alpha Company and also from the other companies with the idea of not wasting them to save them. Now, the other difference between the Spartan 2s and the 3s, Spartan 2s, again, had Mjolnir armor. Spartan 3s were given SPI armor, which is semi-powered infiltration armor. They were not augmented. They were there for sneaking, but they really didn't get any of the benefits.
It was like comparing a tank to a suit of cardboard.
Yeah, pretty much. And, I mean, the fact that the 300 of Alpha Team did do a lot, and the destruction of the shipyard was important, but the fact that you lost all of them for that. Now, those had been pulled aside. They were ones who, again, from those people who played Halo Reach, Noble Team. Noble Team, essentially, all the members of Noble Team were those that would have met the genetic criteria that Halsey originally set aside. Those are the ones that were put as special. They were given special duties, headhunters, where going after specific Covenant threats, and other teams like that. Beta Company was approved right after Operation Prometheus. There were 418 candidates. Again, about 300. Ambrose did a tougher training program for this, but despite everything, in an operation known as Torpedo, 298 the 300 died, with only 2 surviving. Tom B292 and Lucy B091. So again, they accomplished a lot, but it was the fact that sorry about that noise there, but the fact that they essentially weren't equipped like a Spartan would be equipped, essentially made them more vulnerable.
Yeah, they kind of were put into the field with a disability.
Kind of, yeah. And then comes Gamma Company. Yay. The thing with Gamma, it's kind of the same thing, but they were, at this point in time, the UNSC was really they were losing. So they needed to get teams in the field quickly. Alpha and Beta, yes, they were conscripted young, but they were going ahead and pretty much allowed to, when they hit their preteen, when they hit like 13, 14, that's when they were given their augmentation. Gamma Company was a little different. There were 330 candidates. All of them were approved, and all of them underwent augmentation. The difference with Gamma Company, though, was that puberty was artificially induced for them, essentially making them old enough to do the augmentation sooner, even though most of them were still they weren't even preteens, or I'm sorry, they were in their preteens. In addition to the normal augmentation, the Spartan 3s underwent the same augmentation as the 2s. I meant to say that earlier, I'm sorry. The difference is that medical had given them, so all of them could survive. The other difference was there was a series of augmentations given to those members of Gamma Company that were straight up illegal. There was a mutagen given to them, which their aggression, strength, and intolerance to injury. So essentially, as they went into combat and as they would fight harder.
Uppers.
Yes, pretty much. In the book Last Light, one of the actually had both legs broken, and he was still fighting. Now the problem is because under any measure of stress, the members of Gamma could react. So they actually had to take antipsychotic and bipolar drugs known as smoothers. So yeah, they were given this stuff a normal.
Well, and there was then, I think it was Legends, where you had the 2 Gammas who were stuck and they didn't have their smoothers.
No. That in Halo Legends, that was Headhunter.
Yeah. Okay.
Headhunters. The Headhunters were part of the Spartan 3s that actually fit within the genetic material, because those two had there was their armor.
It wasn't the Headhunters. It was the ones that got stuck in the cave. I'm gonna have to go.
I'll have to look that one up again, maybe.
Yeah, because it was they were part of Gamma Company, and they got separated, basically.
Yeah.
And they didn't have their smoothers, and it was like they were slowly unraveling, basically.
Yeah. So, and I'm kind of hitting this part quickly because I do want to get into this or is a little bit. Mm-hmm. But it's the fact the Spartan 3, if one of the debates that's out there is which one's worse, the Spartan 2 or the Spartan 3. And if you look at everything, I mean, the augmentations are still the same. Everything, the training was still the same. They were still young children. Spartan 2s, yes, they were kidnapped. Spartan 3s were orphans that volunteered. But I have everything that I've read, a 6-year-old cannot make that kind of decision. So to me, the Spartan 2s were kidnapped. The Spartan 3s were coerced, and which both neither are good.
Right.
But the fact that the Spartan 3s were put together essentially as expendable, and I would argue that even though they couldn't give them probably could have given them something more than SPI, and had them last longer. I still think the Spartan 3 program, especially if it happened with Gamma, those additional drugs, which essentially were that just tips it from. So,
well, my problem with the Spartan 3s was, like you were saying, they were like from the ground up designed to throwaways. Like,
yeah, and
that's for me is where it kind of is like I'm like Spartan 2s is not, it's not, the bar is not high by any means to the ear, but Eckers.
So yeah, and then then you have the Spartan 4 program. The Spartan program was actually created by a Spartan 2 washout, Musa 096, who essentially made Spartans on his own. He found funding and just created Spartans because he felt that the UNSC needed Spartans. They kind of went back to the Orion model where they got volunteers who had been in the service, and then they tested them and then went through augmentation. Now the other thing is, the thing to remember is the Spartan augmentations are nowhere near what the 2s and 3s went through, because they took the genetic factor out of it. But what kind of makes up for it is the Mjolnir Gen 2 armor is better than the Mjolnir Gen 1 that was worn by the 2s and some of them. And I hope I get this right. One of the guys I know from the Halo community actually interviewed Frank O'Connor one time, and the discussion came, well, could a Spartan 4 beat a Spartan 2?
I remember this.
Now, in armor, if you have a Spartan 2 in Gen 1 Mjolnir and a Spartan 4 in their Gen 1 Mjolnir, they're even. Outside of the armor, they're still fairly even, but because of the training and everything, but the experience of the Spartan 2 would advantage. Now, I really hope I said that right. I believe that's correct. I will try to dig up a link to that interview and get that.
That sounds right, because like that was wasn't that where he also compared the Spartan 2s are like tanks and the Spartan 4s are more like I can't remember what vehicle, but he's like,
I can't. No, it's hard I can't remember the specifics behind that, and I'm sorry, but I mean, that was something that gone back and forth a ton. Who would win between a Spartan 2 and a Spartan?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they're both in their armor, they're going to be equal,
right?
And outside of armor, it would come down to the experience of the Spartan 2, which would give them the advantage. Again, with the Spartan, they don't. I mean, you still have some of the problems that you had with Orion. You have sympathizers with those that are enemies against the UNSC. That was seen in the Escalation comics, where you had Spartan 4s that were trained that were actually sympathizers with the insurrectionists. You had some that were given drugs and gone insane. The one specific that I know of is Ilsa Zane, who was actually one of the first candidates for the program, and given some more experimental stuff so she could be heavily, she wouldn't need Mjolnir armor. That didn't turn out well. She also appears in Halo Initiation, in season, both of which I think are worth a read. So, and also with the Spartan, there's a lot of negative around them because they've been called Spartan Bros before. Anyone who's played Halo, and seen the intro, Majestic, that team, they're the banter that's there and all this other stuff. It's not a surprise for anyone who's been in that kind of banter, but I know a lot of people think that it's misplaced with Spartans, to the point that some have said they shouldn't be called Spartan. Okay, slight plug. I know that someplace on the FFC is a Halo article I wrote.
You should go read it.
It's the Spartan 4s. They're Spartans. They underwent the training. They served the same role as the Spartans 2s did, as Orion did, and even as the 3s. So right now, the Spartan 4s are every bit as equivalent or as much as anyone else before them. So, I know that was kind of rushed, but that's kind of the quick and dirty of it. I could probably go on for another few hours with this.
Nice.
But, I don't know.
It sounds like you should write another article about it.
Yeah, I probably should. I do actually have one, not specifically for Spartans, but, yes, it's probably going to be on Halsey.
Yes.
Because
acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Although, how long is that article going to end up being, Pens?
It probably will never end.
Article? He's going to make a forum. What are you talking about?
It's a book. It's a whole book. The first book of Focus Fire Chat.
It's, there are, just in general, and I know we talked about Spartans, but in general, one of the best characters I have ever, most interesting character I've ever come across in gaming is Catherine Halsey. The only other one that I would probably put in that same category as Halsey is from a perspective of whether you like them or not. It is an interesting character. Their story is interesting. Everything about them. You don't have to agree with what they're doing or what they did, but if you listen to if you pay attention to the logic of why they did what they did, it's like, okay, I can accept that. Still don't like you, or maybe I do like you, but Halsey to me is like I said, there's only one other character that's even close to matching, just from a straight up interest and overall impact in that universe. There's not much you can do in going back to Halsey. This was a story about Spartans, and we're talking about Halsey, or this was a show on Spartans, and we're talking about Halsey. She's just an ultimately interesting character.
Well, and she's just so ingrained with everything.
Oh yeah, yeah. And actually, that's also one of the harder things for people. One of the more difficult things for people to get into the Halo lore is it is so deep. It is so dense, and you can't like jump in without talking about Halsey. And I mean, that's difficult for some people. But if you stick with it, it is. I mean, everything about it is just really interesting. And that's all I got for right now.
Nice. Well, hey, let's run through some shout outs real quick. And so what shout outs you got for us?
I'm going to give it, whenever I'm talking Halo, Halo Fan for Life, which is my Spartan company, Podtacular. If you want to go someplace for general Halo news, Podtacular is great. Halo lore, if you want people who really, really know it, Halo Canon on YouTube. Those three are some of the best groups that I know in the Halo community. And also, to you guys, FFC, I'm actually blown away that that Halo has appeared 4 times on there, and it's been voted on.
Mm-hmm.
Done this 4 times. I don't know why, but thank you for giving me. Yeah, that's something that I really enjoy. On a whim, whenever it came up again, I took a look and it's like, okay, there's been 30. At the time, I think there's 34, and it's like, okay, so we're averaging about every 8.5 extra lore shows, Halo's going to come up. Okay.
But I mean, we obviously Bungie, for one, did a good job writing this, obviously, but there's also, we enjoy hearing you talk about it. We enjoy so many things about this interesting and morally questionable world.
Yes. Yep.
So it's good to have you come back multiple times and explain different aspects and go through the story over and over, because there are a lot of outside of materials from outside of the game. Like, I read the books, but I never touched the comic books. But I also never touched any of the mobile games or the turn-based games that are out there now. So it's like, I don't know any of the extra stuff that's kind of added to it now.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's Halo is my Star Wars. Before they totally dumped if you count the Legends of Star Wars, that's kind of what Halo is to me. It's just, I just love it, and I really appreciate you guys having me on to talk about it. So
No, we appreciate you being here and being willing to jump on. Green, what about you? What do you have this week?
My shout outs are to the fact that Guardian Con is 152 days away. I may have a countdown for 2 things on my phone: my sister's wedding and Guardian Con.
I need to book my flight.
Yeah, I need to as well.
That's yep. I'm right there with you guys. That's the one thing that I have left.
Yep. So that is shout out to anybody who is even considering going to Guardian Con. It's a blast. Even if you're like not a big convention fan, it's fun just going and hanging out with everybody and talking and seeing all the different artists and talking to all the different artists. So if you're considering it, I would suggest maybe figuring out a way to do it, because it's worth it. I may have been hooked the first year going out there, even though my wife was not very happy about the whole thing, because she's not a convention person.
Well, to be fair, I'm not a convention person, but
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoy it. It's just
you enjoy
nice.
video games, though. My wife doesn't.
Right? No, and that's fair. That's fair.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like, you know, it's just the Destiny community as a whole. Like, and it's definitely grown beyond Destiny. You know, I think last year's was the first one that it was like, this is obviously
they had Warframe.
This is obviously not just Destiny anymore, which is 100% awesome. I love that.
Branching out.
But I think also like the core personality of the Destiny community is what is still definitely there. And that's you know, that community, the Destiny community has always been like really accepting, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that is not the case with some conventions. But
I mean, it seems like every community has its clique, right? Like you have your negative cliques and your positive cliques in each community. And Destiny is, by all honesty, no different than any other community. But the thing that it seems to overcome is that it doesn't rip apart their community. Like they may be negative about things, but generally there's not people just being complete and utter jerks.
Right.
Generally. So, I don't know. That's my 2 cents on that matter.
No, I agree completely. That's one of the reasons I really appreciate being around the Destiny community, is that the differences of opinions that normally in the internet will get you yelled and screamed at. I mean, you might get yelled at, but you won't, like, it's not, I don't know. It's not as toxic as some other communities that I've witnessed by any stretch of the. Speaking of other communities, I did want to give a big shout out to Halopedia and Halo Nation, because Halo, they are merging.
Nice.
Are they? They're still voting, right?
They're voting. The idea was, at one point, Halopedia was a part of Halo Nation.
Right.
They split off. The Halo Nation, which is known as the Halo. It had lore stuff, and it had a lot of communities. Halo definitely lore. The content there was pretty much the same across the board, and even though they split, they were still very supportive of each other. But just the situation as things to possibly merge back together, there's some stuff that they're questioning about, you know, admins and things like that, which are more.
Well, my understanding was the hosting site for Halo Nation also was kind of muscling stuff in that they didn't necessarily agree.
If anyone, the hosting site and the hosting service, Halo Nation, that format, there's a ton of ads. There's a ton of stuff that pops up on the page. It makes it real hard to scroll through. The formatting used by Halopedia is one that I like more. It seems cleaner. It's easier to scroll up and down on. That's just personal preference. The data is the same between the two, and the people who are on it, whether they're on Halo Nation or Halopedia, do great work. I just personally hate the fact that as I'm trying to read an article, this ad keeps popping up and taking me back to the top of the page.
Right, and I know that was a big point on the article that I had. I think it was earlier last week. I think they were wrapping up the voting, but I mean, big shout out to them, because that's awesome that they're trying to start trying to merge back into just having the one source for those of us who are interested but aren't like super admins on, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's everything I had. Looking forward to Guardian Con, of course. We have a lot of stuff in between now and then, but we'll still be here as always. We'll see you guys next week, and I think we're going to stick around for a little bit of the after show. So yeah. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/focusedfirechat. Links to all our episode archives can also be found at www.focusedfirechat.com. Please be sure to email us at focusedfirechat@gmail.com with any comments or questions for our team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. Also, be sure to check out all the amazing work being featured over on thelorenetwork.com. So until next time, focus your fire, and may your light shine bright.